Hi everyone, it's William. I'm in the house today because it's really nasty outside, but I'm not in my designated quiet YouTube studio space because I'm still working on that. So of course my dog is going to be noisy. Duke, come here. Yeah, always something. If you're outside, it's leaf blowers and helicopters and garbage trucks, and if you're inside, it's something else. Anyway, we'll give this a try. This is the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series. We're up to 11th February 1921, still in Copenhagen, staying at the English mission. And we have got 3 days to go. The 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th before Dmitri skips ahead to the 28th of February and launches into one of his big, maybe 20-page long summary diary entries where he talks about everything that he's been describing in these short diary entries, but in more detail if there's anything of particular importance to him. That's when he goes back and talks about it. Okay, so in the previous diary entry for the 10th, he had gone to dinner, a dinner hosted by the younger Moltkes, so Marie-Louise and her brother, Leon, and both of them were in their early 20s. They were younger than Dmitri, in fact, and he went to a nice dinner party there. And then afterwards, they went to a ball hosted by the Danish Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Dmitri there found his wife very alluring, his wife Anna, and sort of divided his time the rest of the evening between Anna Scavenius and Marie-Louise. Hopefully he did it in as tactful a way as possible. And if you have a chance to have a look at my Grand Duke Dmitri Diaries Facebook page, you will find a picture there of Anna Scavenius, who is really very pretty indeed. So today we have some of the same people, a different and another ball. So it's a short diary entry, but it's a complicated one, just like the previous one, because there are so many people mentioned in this diary entry, and I do my best to sort of fill in the blanks about those people. So yeah, let's dive in. 11th February 1921, Friday, Copenhagen English Mission. In the morning, I went with Lucia to Audrey Parr's, and then we went shopping together. I lunched with the Marlings at the home of Potocki and his wife. Seryoja Dolgoruki was there, the former ambassador. Seryoja Dolgoruki was there, the former ambassador Baksoevdin with his daughter, and several others. Naturally, it wasn't particularly fun, but it was something I needed to do. From the Pototskis, I went to Audrey Parr's and stayed for quite a long time. She's very sweet and much calmer than she was in London. I went to the home of the American naval attaché and his wife for tea. Their name is Castleman. They're both frightfully sweet and kind people. She's really beautiful. Tea turned out to be a rather boozy affair. We had nautical cocktails, and I left in a very drunken state. Since my hosts had been invited to dinner somewhere, I dined at the Hasselbachs, and though the engagement had been made only the day before, they arranged a remarkable little party after a very nice dinner. My hosts were the Hasselbachs I got to know in Scotland. We all got a little merry, and the party ended only around 4 o'clock. I even danced. Naturally, I had a chance for a long conversation with Marie-Louise, whom I had come to like more and more, and that's it. And my friends, isn't this extraordinary? We've been following Dmitri since January 1921, and through lots of social occasions, including 3 balls now, and he has never danced, not once. But this time he's dancing. So Yeah, extraordinary, extraordinary. So Audrey Parr, if you watched the previous video, she was this very interesting woman who was a muse to a poet and a composer of ballets, and yeah, quite an extraordinary person. She was married to a diplomat who was at this time the first secretary at the English mission in Denmark, and that was why she happened to be in Denmark. But she had figured in Dmitri's diaries when he was living in London in 1919, 1920. Audrey had been around, and I don't recall them having been more than friends, but to be honest, I'm not remembering much about the entries concerning her. And it's interesting that he writes this time that she's much calmer than she was in London. That makes me want to go back and look at those previous diary entries and see what was going on with her when she was in London, that he found her kind of nervous, apparently. Okay, Potocki, someone Dmitri didn't really like. He was the military attaché at the Russian embassy, such as it was at that time period in 1921. And his wife, her name was Sofia Nikolaevna. She was in her early 40s. Otherwise, I don't know anything about them. So the whole shopping thing, yeah, very typical. I mean, Lucia Marling, I swear, went shopping every single day. That seems to have been her main pleasure in life. So yeah, good for her. But anyway, then the Marlings and Dmitri go off and have lunch at the Potockis, and some interesting people are there. So Seryoja Dolgoruki, whom I've heard, he was a general, and he was attached, or had been before the revolution, attached to the service of the Dowager Empress. And I've heard, although I don't know if it's true, that he was somebody's kind of lover or male companion. Maybe it was Ksenia. Yeah, I think it was Ksenia. How old was he? Yeah, he was about 49 at that time. And I believe Dmitri does mention that Ksenia was at that time in Copenhagen because he saw her once. And they talked about the whole the whole Sokolov thing. So yeah, she was in Copenhagen, and her husband had, of course, abandoned her, Grand Duke Alexander Mikhailovich Sandro. So yeah, maybe it's true. I mean, I kind of hope it was. I hope she had that happiness in her life of having a sympathetic companion, even if he wasn't her husband. So Dmitri, of course, knew him from before the revolution. Then there was the former ambassador to Denmark, Buxhoevden, whose name I will never be able to pronounce correctly, no matter how many times I hear it pronounced by people who do know how to pronounce it correctly. And he's there at this lunch with his daughter and several others, presumably Russians, since this was kind of a Russian lunch hosted by Potocki. The daughter we've talked about before, I think, was she a Sophia too? Yeah, Sofia Karlovna. She was about 39, and she had been a lady in waiting to Alexandra before the revolution and quite devoted to her. And after the revolution, over the course of several years, she wrote 3 books, the first of which was called The Life and Tragedy of Alexandra Fyodorovna. And so if you are a Romanov aficionado, you undoubtedly already know about her. And she and Dmitri just don't seem to have had anything to say about each other. Nothing good, nothing bad. They just kind of, saw each other once in a while, and that was about it. They weren't really interested, apparently, in what the other person was interested in. So fair enough. And this isn't a fun occasion for Dmitri, but quite right. He needs to do it, especially since at this point, although the clock is ticking, but at this point, he's still thinking that he's going to be possibly the future ruler of Russia, if anybody is. And so, yeah, he needs to do the right thing. My dog is determined to make noise tonight. So he does, and then afterwards, he goes and relaxes at Audrey Parr's place, whether it was a house or an apartment or in the embassy. He goes there, and he tells us he stayed a long time, and that's when he makes this comment that she's much calmer than she was in London. And there's nothing that I can see reading between the lines that indicates that he went there out of any kind of carnal interest. I think she was just a friend. And then the most interesting part of this diary entry for me is what his next invitation is for tea. He goes to the home of the American naval attaché and his wife. This man's name was Kasselman. He would remain the naval attaché until the following year, I think, 1922. He'd been there, I think, since 1919. He was a seasoned diplomat. We're not talking about an active naval officer who just one day was sent for off the ship and told, well, now you're going to be a naval attaché. No, I mean, he was really a seasoned diplomat. He had been the naval attaché in Norway, in Sweden, in Italy, in Germany, and so he really knew what he was doing. His name was Kenneth Kasselman. He was in his 40s. His wife's name was Jessie. About her, I know only what Dmitri says, which is that she and her husband both were sweet and kind people and that she was really beautiful. So fair enough. I trust his judgment. He had an eye for beauty for sure. But the very interesting thing about this is that when I went to look up Kenneth Kasselman online, really the only thing that came up was something put out by the Department of the Navy itself about the history of naval intelligence in the U.S. And sure enough, Kasselman is mentioned, and I didn't have a chance to read the whole thing. I just looked it up like 5 minutes before I started this. But, he was not just a naval officer or an attaché. He was a seasoned intelligence agent. And the fact that Dmitri was also invited to tea or lunch or something in Paris by the man who was the naval attaché there, or was it the ambassador and then a French admiral, Ambassador Gru, makes me think that for whatever reason, and I've really got to mull this over, American intelligence seems to have been very interested in Dmitri. And, the most obvious thing would be that he was, again, potentially the future Tsar. And another thing, of course, was the whole Rasputin assassination and the suggestion that there might have been an intelligence angle to that. Maybe the Americans wanted to find out if that was true, or the French, I don't know, but they were sure buzzing around him. And I think there's more work to be done. There's more research to be done. And I don't know how drunk they got, but he tells us he definitely got drunk. And he got drunk on what he calls nautical cocktails. So what the heck is that? I've got a friend who's a mixologist, but he's never heard of nautical cocktails. So if any of you have any idea what that is, and this was, bear in mind, these were Americans, then maybe you can let me know. Hopefully they don't have salt water in them or fish sauce or anything gross like that. Okay, so the Marlings had gone off. They'd been apparently had an invitation that they needed to keep, and they went off to dinner somewhere. And so Dmitri was invited to the Hasselbachs, but this wasn't the previous Hasselbach that he mentioned, who was Erich Hasselbach, who was married to one of the von Plessen sisters. This was the older brother, Hugo Hasselbach, and his wife, his second wife, Greta. And he was not Hugo was only 3 years older than Dmitri, and his wife was only 2 years older than Dmitri, but they were a very, very successful business family in Denmark. And Dmitri, in the fall of the autumn of 1920, right before he moved to Paris, he had spent time in Scotland, and he met lots of people in Scotland. And I honestly didn't remember that he'd met the Hasselbachs in Scotland, but maybe when we're done with 1921, we should go back to 1920 so I can refresh my own memory. But he wants to designate in his diary that this is not Erich Hasselbach and his wife. This is Hugo Hasselbach and his wife, the ones that he met in Scotland. So this party, wow, he says we got a little merry. He must have really had a good time. Of course, he hit the ground running, so to speak, because he was already kind of 3 sheets to the wind by the time he showed up for dinner. But he danced. Marie-Louise was there. He was able to have a long conversation with her. And good Lord, this poor woman has had to sit out 3 balls with him not dancing. So she finally gets her chance to dance. And, I shouldn't say that he'd never danced after the revolution until this moment, because he did. When he was in at people's houses and they put on the gramophone, he would dance. But he just never did at balls or public occasions or things like that. But anyway, a good time was had by all. He's not getting any sleep these days, and we'll find out what the repercussions of that are in the next diary entry for the 12th of February. And I hope to see you all again then. Bye.